As dusk settled over the red brick walls of Jawaharlal Nehru University last week, the campus witnessed a spectacle that was once unthinkable. Days ahead of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh's centenary, dozens of Swayamsevaks marched across the campus with drums, trumpets, and clashing cymbals. Many wielded the customary shakha lathis. A few women stood at the pavement strewing flowers at the all-male parade. The saffron flag of the Sangh fluttered defiantly in the campus, which was until recently rebuked by the right wing as a left bastion. Created in 1969 in the memory of India's first Prime Minister, JNU has indeed long been emblematic of the left's cultural and intellectual dominance in the country. From Sitaram Yechury to Prakash Karat, from Prabhat Patnaik to Utsa Patnaik and Jayati Ghosh, some of the leading lights of the country's economic and political left have come from JNU, giving the impression that the university has exclusively patronized left intellectualism. This was not how it was conceptualized, though. In the winter session of Parliament in 1965, animated discussions took place on exactly what kind of a university JNU should be. For the sake of ideological consistency with its eponym, the university, it was agreed, should represent the ideals that Nehru himself lived by: secularism and cosmopolitanism, social justice and scientific temper, his interests in international affairs, and his commitment to world peace. But criticality was to override all these. MC Chagla, then the Education Minister of the country, said spiritedly in Parliament, criticality, that is debate and dialogue, were to be the integral culture of the university. Even secularism and social justice, principles to which the whole nation subscribes, could not be ossified, he pleaded, as he implored the future students and teachers of the university to critique even these ideals, even as they remain committed to them. It was perhaps this spirit of criticality towards even the founding ideals of the university that spurred JNU's polity to steer away from the Congress and often become its most vocal critic. Was the university's anti-establishment character its strength, or, as many right-wing ideologues complain, a compulsive fad emboldened by every passing generation of the university? Was JNU really an ideological monolith where no ideology other than the left's could flourish? And finally, how does one historically, institutionally, and politically make sense of JNU's exceptionalism, conceded to even by those who found themselves at the margins of the university's politics for decades before 2014? Let's begin. In 2019, 50 years after JNU was created and 3 years after it came under unprecedented attack for being a symbol of state-funded sedition, a group of eminent academics from the university published a book titled JNU Stories: The First 50 Years. The names of the chapters from the book, The Classroom, Philosophy at Night, Learning Outside the Classroom, and Accidental Education, Sweet Chai and Restless Thinking, appear to reinforce some of the most common perceptions about JNU's exceptionalism. In JNU, questions of politics, political philosophy, and theory are quotidian preoccupations. As Sudipta Kaviraj, the doyen of Indian political philosophy, writes in the book, every night the messes and dhabas of JNU magically seem to turn into strange amphitheaters of ideas. In the process, the ordinary notions of student life are routinely upended. Questions of abstruse political theory enliven not just the classrooms but the spare time of students, he writes. Even the campus walls are not mere political spectators. If you've ever been to JNU, you know that the ubiquitous murals on JNU participate enthusiastically in its vibrant political life. Every summer, students pour into Chandni Chowk, buying paints, brushes, and paper with ritualistic zeal. Go back 5 decades in time and one realizes that this was not accidental. JNU's exceptionalism was written into its creation. By the 1950s, Delhi University was bursting at the seams. The only university in the national capital, it was struggling to keep up with a new nation's educational aspirations. The infrastructure was cracking, the faculty and funds were inadequate, and the student population on an exponential rise. In 1963, Chagla went to Nehru with a plan. The university, he said, needs a new campus in South Delhi. Nehru agreed. Then Chagla proceeded to his next question with some trepidation. The new campus, he told Nehru, should be named Jawaharlal Nehru University. Nehru flared up. You know my views about raising memorials to living persons. It is entirely wrong, Chagla recalled Nehru as saying to him in his autobiography years later. The university, Nehru recommended, should instead be called Raisina University. But by May 1964, Nehru had passed away. The campus could not only be named after him, but it had to now also be worthy of being built as a memorial to him. It could no longer be just an appendage to Delhi University. It had to be an entirely new and, more importantly, an entirely new type of university. For the next few years, the country's leading academics, philanthropists, industrialists, and lawmakers came together to brainstorm on what kind of a university JNU should be. Even before its first brick was laid, the university had already been destined to become the cornerstone of the fledgling nation's intellectual life. J.R.D. Tata, one of the trustees of the Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund, was of the view that the university be made on the lines of French grand écoles, the institutions that have from the days of Napoleon trained an elite for public service where only the most gifted minds could enter. It is essential, Tata wrote, that amid the arid stretches of mediocrity, there be here and there an oasis of excellence. The university had to be like no other. It had to belong more to students than to professors, a students' republic, where students had a full hand in the shaping of the curricula, of the syllabi, and the entire work and life inside of the university, said G. Ramachandran, a Gandhian educationist and a nominated member of the Raj Sabha. How would students be admitted and assessed? From what backgrounds will they come? How will the faculty be promoted, on merit or seniority? What would the hierarchy between students and faculty be? Almost as an ode to Nehruvian state planning, for months, government committees, the parliament, and even the Ford Foundation discussed every minute detail of JNU's founding principles and administrative functioning. Even the university's architecture and landscape was deliberated with an unusual attention to detail. The hostel buildings, Brahmaputra, Ganga, Godavari, Kaveri, were named after Indian rivers as a mark of national integration. The long forested roads with arid boulders where students continue to lounge around aimlessly were not accidental either. Sir Basil Spence, the architect of Sussex University, had advocated strongly for these waste spaces where friends can walk and talk, discussing the last seminar of the last piece of research or the distinguished lecture. In 1975, Prakash Karat was a young 27-year-old student leader of the Student Federation of India, the student wing of the Communist Party of India Marxist. In an issue of the Social Scientist, the Marxist academic journal, Karat wrote that since its creation, the SFI has strived to ensure that the university does not become a privileged preserve of upper-class students behind the facade of promoting national integration, secularism, democracy, and social justice. All of SFI's struggles were principally directed at thwarting the ruling class attempts to fashion JNU into an ideological center for propagation of the Congress brand of pseudo-radicalism, he wrote. Within a few years of its founding, the Congress government, which had created the university, had come to symbolize a pseudo-radicalism for the Students' Union. How did this happen? The answer depends on who one talks to. Surjit Majumdar, an economist and the president of JNUTA, that is the JNU Teachers Association, and a member of the SFI, told me that one has to see the national context in which JNU was born and the initial years in which its politics evolved. It was the late 1960s, a time of anti-colonialism, a time of intense political turmoil in the country. Nehru was gone, the heady days of independence were passing, the Congress hegemony was breaking, and there was an upsurge towards egalitarianism. Socialism was gaining ground. Indira Gandhi had just nationalized the banks and abolished the privy purses. Yet, failure to actually achieve socialism on the ground was leading to opposition against the Congress. Student organizations were rising across the country. It was in this national political context that JNU's politics began to crystallize. All of this penetrated into the formation of this university, he said. For the JNU Students' Union, which unlike any other university student union, was created by students themselves and not by the university statute, the left turn was perhaps then a natural political outcome. Moreover, for Majumdar, JNU's politics and academic excellence were not coincidental. One could not exist without the other, he said. But that was certainly not true in Pramod Kumar's rendering of the JNU story. Kumar is a chemistry professor at Delhi University and a member of the Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad, the student wing of the RSS, who studied in JNU in the late 80s and 90s and then returned to his alma mater in 2016 as the university's registrar. He says JNU's left turn was a function of an ideologically motivated pick-and-choose strategy adopted by the university in its founding years. He said, Nurul Hasan, who served as the education minister in the 1970s, belonged to the CPM, and all appointments to JNU happened at his discretion. They packed the university with comrades during this time. Through the 1970s, leftism flourished on campus unchecked. It was only in 1977, when Indira Gandhi was driven out of the campus by communists, did she realize what a communist behemoth she had created. In actuality, Hassan had always been a member of the Congress, but his purported membership of the CPM is instructive to understand the ways of law-making around JNU. However, the campus's sometimes formulaic Marxism inside and outside the classroom alienated others too. In the same book, political activist Yogendra Yadav, who was a student at the university between 1981 and 82, wrote that it was the dominant left academic establishment that invited the anti-establishment streak in him. Unlike many of my contemporaries, Yogendra Yadav wrote, I couldn't possibly romanticize the Soviet Union or applaud the practice of Indian communists. While he did applaud the idealism of the Naxalites, their ways, their theories and methods left Yogendra Yadav cold both morally and intellectually. Besides, ridiculing Gandhi was a fad in JNU of those days. Yadav had no patience for it. Yet, the majority of the students and professors of the time were not affiliated to the formal left, argued Kaviraj in his essay in the book. It is not true that most of the JNU faculty were leftists. Scholars without pronounced loyalty or of different political views were certainly more in number than left-wing members, he wrote. The leftists were characteristically more voluble, and they had a large student following due to various strands of the left-dominated student politics of the time. 1980 के दशक में हम सब JNU में काफिर माने जाते थे. In the 1980s, we were all considered infidels in JNU, says Kumar, as he sits in the chemistry lab of DU's Aurobindo College where he teaches. If you told anyone that you were from the ABVP, you could not even find a girlfriend in JNU, he quips. There was extreme ideological apartheid. ABVP existed, but it was all hush-hush, he said. The faculty actively discriminated on the basis of ideology. Students who criticized the left would not be admitted. If by chance they were admitted, they were assessed terribly. Anonymity was our most effective armor, he says. But according to Pramod Kumar, the left's supreme reign in JNU began to show cracks by the late 1980s. 3 things happened, he prefers. 1. Communists in India supported the Chinese state and its excesses even on students when the Tiananmen Square protests broke out. 2. The communists supported Mandal reservations, turning many of their erstwhile supporters away from them. And 3. Advani's Rath Yatra began to attract many students who now felt that there was someone who could speak up for their religious beliefs. The left's floating supporters began to drift away and look for alternatives, Kumar said. That is when the ABVP emerged in a real way. We knew immediately that our roots in JNU are getting strong, he said. This was a heavy time for the former Kafirs. Sushma Swaraj, Arun Jaitley, Arun Shourie, Arif Muhammad Khan, Uma Bharti began to come to the campus for talks. Talks about the Ram Janmabhoomi movement, Gandhi, Kashmir, etc. became election talking points. As Kumar says, we brought JNU back from Kremlin to Delhi. If the 1980s were the decade when the ABVP's roots were taking hold in JNU, by 1996 it had already become a full-grown tree. ABVP won 3 of the 4 central panel seats in the Students' Union election, an event so unbelievable that it seems to have been repressed by many right-wing critics on campus who don't quite seem to remember it. That was the election when SFI and ISA, that is All India Students Association, the students' wing of the CPI-ML, fought separately. They were so taken aback by our victory that they have continued to fight every election together since, Kumar said. The left's undefeatable alliance could have proved to be a permanent stalemate, as it did for several years. With the exception of 2000, when the ABVP won the JNU SU president's post for the first and the last time, victory continued to elude the organization. A deeply fragmented and ideologically divided left continued to dominate JNU's politics. Meanwhile, the 1990s and early 2000s exposed ordinary middle-class Indians to an enchanting new world of markets, prosperity and aspiration. For this aspirational class, JNU became an island of esoteric academia, a hub of jholawalas lost in the self-indulgent and ideal pursuits of intellectualism for the sake of intellectualism and activism for the sake of activism. Never mind that through these years, the university acted as a waiting room for future IAS and IPS officers who enrolled themselves in obscure courses while they prepared for the coveted UPSC examination. Now, on the margins of the imagination of a new information technology and MBA enamored middle class India, JNU was a not too frequent subject of mockery. Yet, it was far from being an object of collective contempt, let alone a symbol of sedition and threat to national security. The country's finest social science university would have to still wait 20 years to earn that distinction. In JNU, 9 February 2016 is spoken of as the university's own BC-AD divide. Everything has changed after 9 February 2016 is a common refrain. It was the third anniversary of the hanging of Afzal Guru. A few students gathered to discuss Kashmir's right to self-determination. None of this was unprecedented. But that night, TV cameras appeared on campus. Video clips in which purportedly seditious slogans were raised too appeared. A few days later, student leaders, including JNU SU President Kanhaiya Kumar and Amar Khalid, were arrested for sedition. National media descended over JNU as absurdly as it did over the fictitious village of Peepli in the 2010 film Peepli Live. Overnight, the university turned into a fortress under siege. Television screens crackled with breathless debates over the university's anti-national character, sexual permissiveness, and its parasitic drain on taxpayers' money. JNU was no longer just a university. It was a breeding ground for those who sought to break up India using intellectual perfidy, the home of India's Tukde Tukde gang. 4 years later, on 5th January 2020, came the physical, bloody attack. Some students on campus were protesting against a fee hike and the Citizenship Amendment Act. A masked mob with sticks, rods, and stones stormed through the campus. Internet and electricity was reportedly cut off. Physical attacks on protesting students, including on then JNU SU President Aisha Ghosh, and faculty members followed, leaving dozens of them, about 30 to 40 of them, with cuts, fractures, and deep bruises. The police, meanwhile, stood by. You ask how JNU has changed in the last 10 years? This is how it has changed, says a beaming Bandana Jha sporting a purple cotton sari with a bright pink and gold border as she points towards a large photograph of the Ram temple in Ayodhya on her table. 10 years ago, it would have been impossible for a JNU faculty to profess their Hindu faith so openly, she says. Jha is a professor at the university's Center for Indian Languages since April 2024. She returned to JNU after nearly 20 years after she had graduated from the Hindi department here in 2001. There is a world of a difference in JNU since then, she says. There was hardly anything Bharatiya about this campus and its ethos, Jha, also an ABVP activist, claims. Now it has all changed, she declares gleefully as she brandishes the university calendar for the year 2025 and sifts through its pages. There are images of the Center for Hindu Studies, Savitribai Phule and Ahilyabai Holkar captioned Nari Shakti, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Center for Security and Strategic Studies, and the Vidyaranya Institute of Knowledge and Advanced Studies, which claims to decolonize knowledge systems with a vision rooted in Sanatani and Dharmic traditions. There is also a sea change in the kind of research topics encouraged by the faculty. Jha, for instance, is supervising a PhD on the feminism of the Panchkanya, 100 Years of Kalyan Patrika, Advaita Ashram, among other topics. All this was unimaginable earlier, she says. Panchkanya, of course, refers to the group of 5 women from the Hindu epics of Ramayana and Mahabharata: Draupadi, Ahilya, Mandodari, Kunti, and Tara. Taking a cue from the developments over the last 10 years, many formerly left-leaning faculty members are beginning to switch sides, Jha says. Many others are retiring. The kind of students who are now coming to JNU too are changing. In 2018, the format of the JNU entrance exam changed from essay type to MCQ type. Since then, the faculty are not able to filter out the students on the basis of ideological leanings, says Shikha Swaraj, a PhD student affiliated with the ABVP. Now, the students who are coming to JNU have a clear goal, she says, which is padhai, likhai or naukri. They know politics will not take them anywhere, she says. There are other reasons for the change in the students' academic orientation. In 2018, JNU established its School of Engineering. In 2019 came the Atal Bihari Vajpayee School of Management and Entrepreneurship. In 2018, the university also introduced compulsory attendance for students and teachers for the first time in its history, a step that was consciously ruled out in the founding years of the university for being infantilizing and inconsistent with the spirit of research and teaching. The university has ceased to be a social science research university, said a professor who requested anonymity. Until just a few years ago, divided between MPhil and PhD, 60% of the students on campus were research scholars. Now they're down to 20 to 30%. The ABVP, meanwhile, has been on the ascent. In the elections held this year, it won a central panel post after almost a decade and lost 2 others by narrow margins. It also won 23 of the 42 councillor posts, including 2 at the School of Social Sciences, once known to be a hub of Marxist professors and students. Earlier, admittedly, the teachers had a bias against students who subscribed to the BJP RSS ideology, but there was never a full-blown attack on academics itself, the professor quoted above said. The problem is that as a result of the formal left's volubility all these years, JNU came to represent the deep feelings of victimhood and otherization harbored by the right wing. That is why winning JNU has almost been more important for them than winning some state elections. It is finally like conquering the institution that has represented their intellectual marginalization and humiliation for decades. What has been lost in the process is more important than an ideological battle, he said. This is Sanya Dhingra. Thank you so much for watching. You can also read this story on ThePrint.in.